Good evening and welcome to episode 4 of Reading Between the Lineups, the show that seeks out the person behind the Discord persona. I'm your host, DRC, and we've got an absolutely dynamite show for you tonight. My guest tonight is none other than Out of the Park's own Director of Live Content Services, Kris Jardine. We got him. Snaggle J, the wrangler of the Discord, the bringer of hype, the face of this weekend perfect team. And get comfy. This was a long interview. This is 90 long minutes once we get to it. So settle in, get yourself a cup of coffee so you don't fall asleep on us. But it was a great interview, and one that I think you guys will enjoy. We talked about his background, how he got into Out of the Park, what his expectations were at the beginning, how his role evolved over time. We talked about buckets of content questions from every angle that you could imagine. We're going to get into a bunch of stuff with that. And then what we did is we looked to the future as well. We looked to PT22. We looked to what Kris wants to do in the future, what his aspirations are, really where he sees himself going with the role. And one thing to note, Kris does have a prior commitment, so he will not be in the chat to enjoy this interview and take live questions from you, but he will be watching video on demand. He's actually streaming on his own channel right now. But first, as always, we start this show with a quick hit of Hit and Run. And tonight, what I want to talk about is small change, potentially big problem. So this morning, 10:15 a.m. Central Time, we got a little note from Kris in the Discord. We've made a small server-side change to how the AI recognizes teams using opener follower strategies by methods other than the opener follower designation, i.e. low pitch counts, in order to deploy the correct handed lineup based on the opener follower options. This has been done to limit teams attempting to take advantage of a team's opener follower lineup settings by circumventing the opener follower mechanic. So the first thing I want to do is just conceptually take a step back. Why is this mechanic in the game to begin with? It's there for the manager. So the opener revolution, the opener movement, if you will, came to Major League Baseball. And one of Out of the Park's players probably said, hey guys, get this in the game. I want to try it. I want to see if it works for my team. I want to play with it. I don't think the spirit of this being in the game, the opener follower mechanic, was so that the opponent could know what's going to happen from inning 2 and beyond. I don't think it was done to tip the hand of the manager. I think the spirit of it is really to give the owner, the manager, more functionality and more flexibility for what he's doing with his team. In real life, you don't see Kevin Cash, when he hands over his lineup card for a playoff game, tell his opposing manager, hey, when this guy's done, you know who's coming in next? That guy. And just heads up, I know my starters are lefty, but he's going to be a righty. He doesn't do that. Aaron Boone doesn't do that. Aaron Boone used an opener in the playoffs. He doesn't do that. So I think that the existence of this mechanic in the game is great. Well, let's mimic realism in terms of optionality for a head coach, for a manager, as much as possible. But I think the spirit of Major League Baseball having this in it does not include notification or advance warning to the opposition. So if you want my face value take, keep the mechanic in the game and mask it entirely to the opposition. Don't even have the option in there to say, set lineup to likely follower. But let's forget that. Let's forget that for a minute. It's been in the game the entire cycle. It's an active part of the game meta. You know, people have built teams around this. People have built strategies, entire strategies, on running their perfect league teams around this strategy and the way that it has existed since the game launched. It's a phenomena. It's a strategy that has been well studied, that people understand how it works or understood how it worked before today. And now that has changed. And I truly do believe that from the out of the park perspective, this was perceived to be a bug. People had complained about it. People had shared their thoughts about how it was a failure of the mechanic designated by the game or intended by the game. They looked into it and they said, yep, people are doing this. And then they fixed it. And it was probably perceived as just, okay, this is something that's not working as intended. We'll just fix it. We'll roll it out. And people probably won't care that much. But it's not a bug. Honestly, it's a nuanced bit. It's a nuanced part of the cat and mouse game that is going manager versus manager. One of the more fun ones. And people might disagree with that. I think there's plenty of people that don't have the appetite to or the availability to babysit their team over the course of a day. And they would love to not run the risk of being pseudoed or false openered or faux openered, whatever you want to call it. But I disagree. I think it's part of that cat and mouse game. And I'll point to the first Perfect League World Series I went to against Maine Whiskey Tango, when he did a great job. He was able to predict what I was going to do with a false opener, set his lineup to counter that, and then profited by winning the game. And I think removing that element of the cat and mouse as it existed previously, I think that would be a mistake. And secondly, people have invested very notable amounts of perfect points to build teams on this strategy as it existed before. They've reinvented their teams. They've torn down. They've built up, assuming they would be able to deploy teams and deploy players with the way that the game had been since it launched. And so I think pulling the rug out there right after an hour and 15 minutes after Sims started on a Monday, and again, I totally give Out of the Park the benefit of the doubt here. They probably didn't have any idea that as many people would have a big issue with this, because from their perspective, sure, I can totally understand the perspective that it just looks like a bug that they're fixing. It's something people have complained about and they're fixing it. But doing it when they did it and how they did it really upended some strategies, I'm sure. And I think we've already seen people trying to diagnose exactly how the new way works. You know, what are the breakpoints? When does it go from following the follower lineup to the non-follower lineup? And I'm not here to talk about how that's currently working right now. I'm just here to talk about the spirit of this change and whether or not we agree with this being a problem and wanting it to go away, or whether or not this is part of the game and should be going forward. Now, where I wanted to turn my focus as well is like why this exists. Why did the false opener strategy take off? Why has this proven to be a profitable strategy for owners to employ? And I think you need to look no further than the splitty nature of the game. And when I say splitty, hey, thanks for the subscription there, Rita. Really appreciate it, man. When I say splitty, I mean that pitchers are significantly better against their same side and significantly worse against the left side. Hey, Mac, thanks so much for the gift bomb. 5 subs going to the community. You're the man. Thanks so much. And you can see it in all 3 metrics. The ERA, significantly higher. The FIP, significantly higher. The WHIP, the WHIP is night and day. 113 to 141 is night and day. That's a base runner and a half per inning versus a base runner an inning. Wild difference. And you might say, well, hey, maybe Maddox was worse versus left-hand batters. Well, let's take a peek at that. Let's take a peek at that for a second. Not the case. Maddox was basically the same guy against both sides. His WOBA versus left was 311. His WOBA versus right was 309. And so we've talked about this in the past. We'll talk about it a little bit more now. The way that you have both pitcher back of card ratings and hitter back of card ratings effectively serves to double dip. So when the pitcher is better versus right and the right-handed batter is worse versus right, you kind of have an amplified impact. And you can take the inverse as well. And I think that's why we see such drastic splits. But this right here is what I believe is the reason that we see very platooned lineups, because lefties need to be in the lineup versus righties, and righties need to be in the lineup versus lefties. If you look at how many players have positive bat value against the same side pitcher, you can count them on less than one hand. It's basically Cobb, maybe Gwynn, maybe Hornsby. End of list. And that doesn't fairly represent actual baseball. And I think that this nature is what's driven us to the over platoon lineup, and the over platoon lineup is what's driven us to the false opener. So I think if you want the false opener to go away, perhaps there's something to look at for next year as to how we're generating these observed statistics. The real answer that I want to get to, or that I think is the appropriate response, would be to encourage teams to get to balanced lineups. If you don't want to have a false opener pitched against you, don't throw out 8 right-handed batters versus a left-handed starter. I think that's the direction that things should go. Instead of allowing that person to have assurance that that lineup is going to get to mash on that left-handed pitcher all game long, perhaps they need to learn through either success or failure that's going to happen to them. And if they're going to be AFK from their team for 12 hours in a given day, you can't leave your lineup with 8 of one side against the other and not be vulnerable to that type of strategy. Yeah, Nosy, I just lowered the sub volume. Sorry about that. All right, so enough about this. So we can move on. But those are my thoughts on it. I think that it's a nuanced conversation. It's one that I'm guessing is bigger than had been anticipated, and it's one that I know that Rich is more than happy to have. Rich is a very adaptable COO, CMO. He's absolutely welcoming all community feedback, and if something's not working, we know he'll change it. So I would just encourage everyone to provide their feedback, and we'll see where we go from here. All right, before we get to Snaggle, let's do a quick little reminder on the program schedule. So Thursdays, what's that? Look at that. Something just bounced in there in the middle. So Thursdays, we've got This Week in Perfect Team. And with Rich moving his stream out, we now go on right after Kris. So Kris drops the content, and then we jump right in, Kidneys and I, and we evaluate it all. Make sure you join us then. Sundays, I broadcast the Perfect League World Series. And I will do that until I get relegated. And I did not get relegated last week. I happened to take it down. Got my first Perfect League title. Very happy about it. Took down the Hawksview Valley Cats. And it was a ton of fun. And for those of you that were there sharing that moment with me, thank you for doing so. And then lastly, we've got this show, Reading Between the Lineups. And I'll be sharing next week's guest at the end of this stream. So let's get to Snaggle J. That's why everyone's here. That's why everyone joined tonight. Let's get right to it. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. We got him. Kris Jardine himself. The Snaggle J. Thank you so much for joining me tonight and being willing to come on this little show. I'm very appreciative for it. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. I think first and foremost, congratulations are in order. A lot of people who are probably watching and listening to this were watching as you won the Perfect League, your first Perfect League championship live on stream. I was there catching bits and pieces of it, so congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then.
Well, listen, I think you're catching me at a good time. I'm catching you at a good time. You're riding high. I'm always riding high. So, I'm really excited. I've enjoyed the first couple episodes of the show that you've done. The guests that you had have been top notch. And it's a tough act to follow. Quanta Condor did an amazing job. It was a great show to watch last week. So I'm hoping I can live up to your expectations and the community's expectations, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I have no doubt here. I've got more questions for you than I've had for anyone else. So we'll dive right in, and really where I want to focus initially is a little bit around your background. I think a lot of people don't know, the origin story of how you came to be within your position at Out of the Park, really who you are. So let's start with where or how you came up with the handle Snaggle J.
So the handle itself dates back to the 8th grade. So for me, that would be the mid to late 90s. And it just kind of was a random thing. I remember the situation vividly. We were in the middle of a game. I was at the plate, and my third base coach yells out, "Let's go, drive him in, Snagglepuss." And everyone just kind of stopped for a second and was like, because I didn't really have a nickname up until that point. And if you don't have a nickname around the ball field, everyone just kind of calls you by your last name. So it was always Jardine this and Jardine that. And here we are a quarter century later. And it's taken on many forms over the years. There's people who call me Snag, people who call me Snaggle J, obviously with the addition of the last name there. It's always been something that people have called me, continue to call me exclusively. So when I started, building an online persona, back in 2007, I think was the first time I really dabbled with doing anything content related. Obviously, Snaggle J was just the natural evolution of that. It sticks with me to this day. It'll stick with me until I've long departed this great earth.
Yeah, so that's cool that it's actually a baseball nickname, not something that you as a streamer or a content creator were trying to come up with something cool, incorporating the first initial of your last name. So that brings me to my next question. How long have you been streaming?
So live streaming itself, a little over 5 years. I was always interested in the concept of live streaming. So I had kind of thought, it would be something I would like to try. And I remember initially I was streaming on my PS4 with the PlayStation, camera that you could buy to go with it. My wife picked it up for me as a Christmas present in 2014. And I still have it to this day. It's floating around here somewhere, I'm sure. And I remember the first game I ever streamed was NHL, whatever NHL was out at the time. So that would have been 15. And I mean, it was just horrendous content. I mean, it was really brutal. But I enjoyed doing it. I made connections with a few people that I still have connections with to this day. It's part of the reason why I'm to be able to be here doing this podcast with you is those kind of inroads that I made. And I've been more and less into streaming as time has gone on. I think for me it was always going to be just a pastime, something that I could do, a night here, a night there. I never saw it as something that I was going to like try to make a career out of. Um, but yeah, I think it's taken on some different forms over the years. But I do enjoy streaming. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and clearly it's working. You're in the role that you're in now. And so what I'd love to do is just hear the whole origin story. I think we've heard bits and pieces of it now. But how did you first, become aware of this game, start playing the game, and then get connected to the company, and then all the way to where, in many respects, you're now the face of the franchise? Pardon the pun.
Yeah. I mean, so my introduction to the game would probably be Out of the Park 10 or 11. So I used to work in Alberta in the oil sands regions, and there was my coworker and I. We were both big baseball fans. We were both big fantasy sports guys, and he stumbled across Baseball Mogul, which I think a lot of people who have kind of evolved through the years of playing, baseball strategy games. Baseball Mogul is a really good starting point that a lot of people who have been around for 10, 15 years will point to.
Yeah, that was my first.
Yeah, so and I mean it was something that it was easy for us. We both had a franchise. We'd play, an hour here, an hour there. We would trade off and we would both try to see who could, win more championships or win a championship first. And we logged many, many, many hours playing it. And then I stumbled across Out of the Park, and I want to say it was Out of the Park 10. And the first thing we realized was that Out of the Park was way more complicated in terms of there was so much more stuff to do, and there was so many more features, and it was so much more customizable. And I got into it more on a personal level, and I would play it, an hour here, an hour there. And then I played 10, 11, and 12, and then I kind of moved away from it a little bit. My work circumstances had changed, and I really wasn't playing baseball simulation games anymore. And there was kind of like I knew that when Out of the Park 16 came out, I bought it, I played it, I enjoyed it. 17 came out, I bought it, I played it, I enjoyed it. And during those times, like after those ones had come out, probably in like 2016 or so, I had made a connection with TJ Lauerman, that sports gamer. He's Out of the Park's head of community. I'm sure most people know who he is. We had made a connection initially through the Madden community, and then we made a little bit later, but a similar connection through the MLB The Show community.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, TJ was doing it was a live podcast called Bullpen Banter. That was a MLB The Show focused show. He and Mills did it every week. And it just so happened that there was one particular episode where Mills couldn't make it. And, TJ and I had been kind of building a friendship. He asked me if I would fill in. And the rest is kind of history. TJ and I became, really good friends. And along the way, there was some conversations because TJ was involved with OTP already at that point. As a community manager, doing some streaming, doing the social media. And he kind of put the bug in my ear that like, hey, like we had these plans, like, 18 months to 2 years to 3 years out. And, at some point we're going to be looking to expand the team. And is this something that you might be interested in? And we always kind of kept talking about it. And in the summer of 2017, I got the opportunity to do some content pieces for OTP. There was a stream I was able to fill in on. I did a franchise, a Jays franchise of some sort, the details of which elude me at this time. But that was kind of my foot in the door So, they started seeing that there was value to having somebody else doing content. And eventually that turned into like an informal sort of, hey, like, we'll use you as a content creator once a week. You can stream a little franchise or do whatever. And 3 years ago today, actually, as we're recording
Oh wow.
is my official start date at Out of the Park Baseball. November 1st, 2017. I officially became associate community manager of Out of the Park Baseball. Now, so at that time, Out of the Park Baseball was just Out of the Park Baseball. There was no perfect team. There was no, there was discussions of perfect team. I took the job under the pretense that behind the scenes there was planning going on for this card collecting mode that they were going to be releasing, and that we were going to kind of treat it as a like socially as kind of its own thing, and that we'd like to have its own community manager. And those wheels were already in motion before I officially became an employee. Um, and I tell you, the 3 years since then have been the most unimaginable wild ride, like the kind of things that people write books about. And I know that sounds like far reaching and over the top, but every day that I'm affiliated with Out of the Park Developments is an amazing day that you never know what it's going to bring. I mean, you look right now, like literally you and I are recording this, and Rich is streaming with Steve Lyons doing a charity stream on the Twitch channel. Like, it's that kind of stuff that's just, it continues to amaze me, the kind of things that I've been able to do and we've been able to do with this game. Um, that started as a harmless conversation between TJ and I of, hey, we'd really like to get some help with our social media, to look at what the heck I'm doing now.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild ride, and I think that your profile as a streamer and Out of the Park's profile as a game have definitely both exploded. With Perfect Team probably being the big impetus behind it. And really walk us through what those detours from your expectation have meant to you. You thought you were getting into one thing, and now reality, the last 3 years have been something completely unimaginable to you. Now walk us through the stages of that detour, really, and how those detours have been positive, how have they been negative, and really like how satisfied are you to look back at those 3 years and see the job that you've done to this point?
So I think, like, initially, I really didn't have any expectations of what I was getting into. That first year was, a lot of Perfect Team groundwork, and this is what we're going to do, and this is where it's going to start. And for anybody who remembers the initial version of Perfect Team and Perfect Team 19, I mean, it's a shell of what it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And we had these ideas of what we wanted to do and where we wanted to go, and we had a roadmap. And I think for me, having been up until that point a considerable, maybe considerable is not the right word, but I was an active member of the MLB The Show Diamond Dynasty community. I enjoyed playing it. We did podcasts and live streams, and I wrote blog articles highlighting some of the content and some of the new stuff. And I made some inroads in that particular community that helped my following. I had a general idea of how these communities interacted and what the expectations were. And then when we got closer to the Perfect Team 19 release, the subject of, well, what are we going to do for supplementary content? And that's kind of when it started to become clear that it wasn't really something that we were ready to understand the impact of. We knew that we wanted to, take a page from those other games and say, okay, well, we want to have weekly content, and we want to highlight new cards, and we want to give people stuff to do. But I think we didn't really realize in that initial Perfect 19, which a lot of people refer to as a beta, and in a lot of ways it was. We didn't really understand the impact that that would have.
Mm-hmm.
So, very quick turnaround from 19 to 20, because again, 19 didn't launch until October. So that was, and I mean, this week in Perfect Team, which was, I will admit, and Rich always tells me that I should take more credit for the stuff that I've done, and I hate doing that. Like, I'm a team player. I love, saying that we've achieved things as a team, but this week in Perfect Team was my idea. I pitched the idea to Marcus and the rest of the team that we would have a weekly show called This Week in Perfect Team, where we would highlight some various things that were happening in the game, launch our content. And then in episode 3 of This Week in Perfect Team, we had Lance McCullers Jr. on the show.
Cool.
And at that moment, I remember finishing that interview, and Lance was in an airport waiting to get on a plane. And, it was kind of, I don't want to say it was thrown together last minute, but it felt kind of rushed, and I felt like we weren't as prepared as we should have been. But I remember finishing that show, and I remember messaging Rich and saying, we've got something special with this show and with this. And that moment, which was in early December of 2018, I went back to the drawing board of what do we want Perfect Team 20 to look like from a content standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And, we knew, obviously we knew that missions were going to be a thing, that tournaments were going to be a thing. Obviously, both of which we were hoping to have in the game sooner than we did, but, you can't rewrite history in those respects. But we knew missions were going to be a thing. It was going to be a big part of what we were going to try to do with content. We knew that we wanted to have the weekly show, This Week in Perfect Team, with a weekly, packable card set. And, myself and a couple other members of the team, Lucas especially, who was kind of, my co-pilot with a lot of this stuff and my sounding board with a lot of this stuff. We put together what we thought was a great program.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be the first person to admit that in Perfect Team 20, we were making a lot of it up as we went. We had a bare bones idea of this is what we want to do, but there was a lot of scrambling and panic from week to week of what are we going to do with these cards? We need cards for this. We need cards for that. And, because again, none of us had ever done that before.
Mm-hmm.
Like, none of us had ever planned a content program before. So, we made it through. We got the missions launched, we got the tournaments launched, and then we really hunkered down. And I think it wasn't necessarily a conscious decision, but at that point, and you're probably talking October of 2019, I remember the Slack conversation where I essentially said, guys, I'm going to take the reins of content, and it's going to be my thing, and I'm going to put it all together. I'm going to show you guys what I have. We're going to tweak it as a group, and that's what we're going to go with.
Mm-hmm.
And in January, and so, I mean, you're talking 2.5, 3 months of building out a plan. And, if you want to get into more of the specifics, in a little bit, we can for sure. But we built, I built a plan from A to Z and said, here's the plan. Here's what we're going to do. 45 weeks of content from week 1 to week 45, everything in between. What do you guys think? And we talked about it as a group. We made a couple tweaks. And, I don't know how, are you familiar with the TV show, The West Wing?
Yes.
Okay. So do you remember the episode later in the series where they're on the Santos plane and they're going over the last 5 days of the Santos campaign? And Josh says, there you have it, the last 5 days of the Santos campaign. And he draws a line on the bottom of it on the whiteboard. That was essentially our moment that we had.
Mm-hmm.
We said, this is it. This is our content plan. We're committed. We're signed, sealed, and delivered. And that was the moment where I literally thought to myself, well, I hope this doesn't suck. Because if this sucks and people hate it, like, it's something that I put together. It's I take personal ownership of it. So then, you fast forward to where we are now, November 1st, November 2nd, as people are listening to this. We've executed the first 33 weeks of the content program. I with all the things COVID related and the extra amount that people are playing the game, the massive influx of users we've had, all things that, continue to amaze me every single day. The amount of people that interact in the Discord, the level of hype that people show for our content. There's never a day that goes by that I'm not taken aback by where we were 2 years ago and where we are now. And you know what? I'd be lying if I said I wasn't proud of what we've done as a team.
Mm-hmm.
There were moments where we wanted to look at it from the point of view of maybe this wasn't as successful as we thought it was, but we don't really discuss things in those kind of terms. We always look at the positives of what happened and the constructive things that come from a situation and how we can make it better. Content is no different. Has the content program been absolutely perfect for Perfect Team 21? Absolutely not. I think, I have no problem telling people if the content program is perfect, then what would we have to make better for next year? What changes could we make to improve it and make it a better experience for the users? I think perfect in terms of content is an illusion. I think it's constantly chasing that thing that you can never reach. I've already started working on the Perfect Team 22 content plan. I think it's going to be better than the Perfect Team 21 content plan, largely because of the feedback that we've gotten from, a lot of users who are extremely invested and want to see the game grow and want to see the game get better. But yeah, I think for me to sit here and say that I'm not proud of some of the things that we've accomplished as a team, I would be absolutely lying.
I find it so interesting that there was that revelation moment when someone, and it sounds like it could have been you, just said, holy crap, guys, this game is about the content. This game is about the successive releases on a weekly basis of content. This game is about the power creep of the game cycle. Someone needs to really grab the reins on this and take it very seriously. And it sounds like you were the one to really rise up and meet that challenge. And I think looking at where PT19 was and looking at where we're at today, when we're able to have very nuanced conversations and discussions about how the game cycle has gone and where the missteps were, I think that's almost losing the forest from the trees and looking at what is within a 27-month period of time, a whole-scale reinvention of the game.
I mean, we went from Perfect Team 19 releasing 6 relatively random cards as content, and I think we released content for Perfect Team 19 for probably, 10 to 12 weeks before we stopped. And they were just kind of thrown together things, relatively random ideas. I think Perfect Team 20, the content sets were still quite small with 6 cards, and that they were, we had a different theme every week, but there was no structural continuity, as I like to call it in our circles. And Rich hates when I use the term structural continuity because he doesn't think it applies, but it does. I think as the season goes on, there needs to be a continuity to what we're doing. And I think it's very easy for us to lose sight of the fact that even though each of the 45 weeks of content is its own unique experience, there has to be an ebb and flow as you go from one to the next and one to the next. And I know people are going to be screaming, well, you guys destroyed that with Face of the Franchise. And again, I will say, and I have no problem saying it, Face of the Franchise is the crown jewel content that we've ever done. For the simple fact that it created the most engagement, it created the most hype, It created the most criticism. It created the most feedback. It created the most levels of, I mean, I already said engagement, but levels of emotions in people that, face of the franchise for me is what's going to shape our content for the next 5 years. It was that important of a content. And I know, again, a lot of people look at it in a vacuum and think, well, it's Perfect Team 21, it's what we have. But what people don't realize is the way Face of the Franchise worked and rolled out and was received and was critiqued and was praised, and the feedback that was given is going to shape the next 5 years of content for this game. So that's where, again, that structural continuity is extremely important. And I'd like to think I'm getting better at this job every day. I think you're right. There was a period of time where, I kind of looked at content as we needed to step up, and that person needed to be me. Just based on the fact that I felt like I had not the best ideas, but the best sense of how we could make content be what it is, which is, in certain ways, the content is the game. And I think we continue to try to show that every week, that that we're putting the effort we need into the content. And I just, all I can hope for is that every Thursday night, people continue to think that we're getting better, and that we're listening, and that we're taking the feedback, and we're just trying to make the best experience that we possibly can.
So to the community, Face of the Franchise was a months-long reveal, gigantic build-up, gigantic rewards, starting from that first set, which had your Gwyn and your Brett in it. So really fireworks from day one, that flowed through to the grand reveal of the toppers, which was another explosive moment and transformative moment in the game cycle. So to us, it was this months-long thing that really wasn't in our purview or on our consciousness until that point. For you, was Face of the Franchise something that you were drawing out on a napkin the prior February? And as you drew it out on the napkin, or however you were planning out the content set, did it go the way you thought it would go?
So to answer your first question, one thing I had decided in November when I started planning out the content was, what was the main event going to be? Now, I know people are going to start ripping and saying, well, how do you have your main event end in September? Like there's still all these months left. But I think I looked at Face of the Franchise right away as the main event, the centerpiece of what we wanted to do. And I thought, listen, it's going to have, 30 of our best rewards, and we're going to have these great, team related missions. We're going to tell the history of baseball, all throughout the years, and we're going to have these amazing cards that people are going to want, and we're going to have these great toppers. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. It's going to be super desirable. People are going to be, fighting over these cards, trying to get them. And I think, for the most part, it went how I expected. I'd be lying if I said it went exactly how I wanted it to go and how I envisioned it going. I think, a lot of the points that I'm displeased with are things that the community is also displeased with. That it was too long. That the teams could have been shuffled a little bit differently structurally. But overall, it went, in terms of reception and overall, hype generated, it went how I wanted it to. But I think there's definitely some things that happened over the course of Face of the Franchise that I didn't necessarily anticipate, that I wish I could have done slightly differently. And I hate saying that, because I'm not really a wish I could do things differently kind of person. I kind of live in the moment. I don't really look at things and say, I have a redo on that one, with the odd exception, like, for example, having Eddie Plank be the double for Oakland.
Sure.
I've been on the record as saying that was a mistake. That was a absolute boneheaded mistake on my part, 100%. But yeah, I think for me, again, it was such a good learning experience. There was a lot of things that went how I expected it. There were some things that I didn't anticipate would be problematic. But overall, again, in terms of the greater package, the greater content, the development of Perfect Team, it it was it was just exactly what we needed.
So let's talk about the Discord hype, the message board hype for a second. I think a lot of that was fueled not only by the power of the cards and not only by the transformative nature of the set of releasing so many powerful cards that were really profoundly changing the cards you needed to be successful, but I think a lot of that was also fueled by the content hints. And in a lot of ways, those content hints are a double-edged sword. They're absolutely gasoline on the fire that is content discussion on Discord. Like I remember one set of hints that set the content discussion channel on fire for the better part of 7 hours. And even then, no one really landed on the correct answer early on in the face of the franchise release. But it did also result in some big time reveals ahead of time that took some air out. And I think of the very final face of the franchise 6. Those last 5 cards, pretty much everyone knew what they were. And then with the hints that were leaked about the toppers, that you released about the toppers, someone was able to programmatically decode them to have an idea who the toppers were. So how did that go versus how you thought the hints would go?
So the idea to drop hints was a calculated risk on our part. It was a test for us to see um, how this would be received, how it would be, uh, you know, decoded and deciphered and picked away at. I think it was a conscious thing that we did because we've seen evidence of again, we borrow a lot of things from what other games are doing, and for us we went to Discord, which is our most active social media. At the time of face of the franchise, we had over 6,000 members in the Discord. We have over 7,600, I think, now. So immediately you can get instant feedback, instant sort of indications on how it would work. And we consciously thought, let's see how this will work if we sort of nudge people in a particular direction. Um, I am a little disappointed that it took away the luster from the last couple sets of cards because people pretty much had figured out who it was. But I also think it led to ridiculous amounts of engagement. And for us internally, engagement equals viewers, and viewers typically equal people who want to go to the game and rip packs and spend time in the game. So for us, it was I don't want to say we would chalk it up as a win or a loss, that overall experience. It was a lot of fun. I think that there were, again, I'm kind of disappointed that it took away from the last group of people. But our users are just so smart. Like, it's insane. Like, you've got people literally developing like scripts in Excel to try to calculate who these cards are, and like I'm like you can't underestimate how smart segments of the OOTP user base are, because I was seeing people deciphering who these people were going to be within minutes, and I'm like, it's just so impressive. I
Yeah,
think it's
dangerously smart.
yeah, and I think it's something we'll continue to do because I do enjoy the engagement that it brings. I do enjoy sitting back with my bowl of popcorn, as people know that I do, watching people, especially early in the program, just wildly, blindly guessing at who they thought faces of the franchise would be. Um, so it's definitely something that I think we'll refine, and we'll figure out different ways to do that over time. But again, it's about keeping people engaged. It's about keeping people interested. Again, if we when we look at face of the franchise as the centerpiece of our content program, well, we want the community to feel like it's the centerpiece of our content program as well.
Right.
So that was kind of why we kind of went in that direction as a hype builder. I mean, it was, you don't like, a lot of people will point to Twitch drops as being kind of the reason why our Twitch channel took off. But if you actually look at the streams before Twitch drops, we were pulling in triple our regular viewers for This Week in Perfect Team on a regular basis. Like the This Week in Perfect Team viewership was going up at an exponential rate throughout Face of the Franchise because people were engaged. People wanted to see, was I right? Do I hate this Face of the Franchise choice so I could rip on it? And so again, for us, it was trying something different. It was trying to keep people engaged and entertained, and it was a lot of fun on a lot of different wavelengths for sure.
Were you surprised at the redemption rates? Aside from Face of the Franchise 1, which proved to be the bottleneck for many users, a good number of people were completing most of these drops on night 1. Was that something you anticipated?
It's hard for me to say surprised because I don't really go into them with like an idea in my head of, well, I think 75 people are going to complete it, during this period of time. I don't really look at that sort of stuff. I honestly, I think given that the structure of the 30 of them was pretty similar, I'm not really surprised. I mean, it was pretty easy for people to decipher kind of what they were going to need and to speculate and to pre-buy and to be ready to go. I think people knew all 30 teams were coming. They knew we were going to do toppers. So I'm not really surprised. Again, we saw a similar sort of thing on a much smaller scale in Perfect Team 20 with the team history missions because it was the same idea. Everybody knew the team was coming at some point. In Perfect Team 21, with the additional influx of users we've had, more social connectivity with the Discord and stuff for people to be able to speculate and buy cards and flip cards, and I think definitely not surprising at all. Yeah, I'm definitely not surprised.
So besides Face of the Franchise, and maybe that wouldn't be your answer anyway, but what was your favorite content set this cycle and why?
That's tough. I like them all. It's hard for me to sit and pick a favorite. I always love doing the Negro League stuff. It was by far and away my favorite set last year. It was a great set again this year. We expanded it to, we added an extra 10, 12 cards. We added the Jackie reward. So like Negro League always has a special place for me, after we did it in 20 and then seeing the exhibit in Cleveland and, the history and everything surrounding that. I can always default to the Negro League content as being my favorite. I'm a big fan of the postseason content. I know that's kind of thematic and it's kind of out there right now, but I'm a big fan of the postseason content. But yeah, those would probably be. I mean, Face of the Franchise was great too. But yeah, I think for me, it's hard to pick in this particular cycle just one.
Well, they're all your babies. You love all your babies.
Well, and that's kind of the thing, right? Is that for me, like being the one guy that puts this all together, it's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in 20, where there was a little bit, not necessarily more people involved, but the content was more of a discussion group as opposed to one person saying, this is what I want to do. In 21, again, like, I mean, there's still lots of great content left. Maybe my favorite content is probably one that isn't even out there yet. Like possibly, maybe we got some pretty.
That's some pre-release hype you're pumping right there.
Here's the thing: is that again, and that's why I was cautious earlier in saying that Face of the Franchise was kind of the main event because a lot of people believe that main event comes at the end. In this case, it most certainly does not. There's still a lot of good stuff. We got a dozen weeks of content left. There's still a lot of great stuff in the can. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's in 21. It's really hard for me to point to one particular week and say that week was my favorite.
That makes sense. So, aside from the courteous and considerate and overly professional feedback that is brought to you each week on This Week in Perfect Team, Thursdays after your stream, it does seem like player feedback on cards, whether in your stream, whether in the Discord, does eat at you sometimes. Is that true? And walk us through that emotion when it happens.
So it's I mean, I could sit here and say it's not true, but people will find all kinds of empirical evidence that points 100% to the contrary. So I won't even try to sit here and lie and say it doesn't. I think the thing is that it's a me problem for sure. Like my thing is like you touched on in the last thing, right? I take this content very seriously. I mean, this content is, it's not my life. I mean, the thing is that to me, out of the park developments is a second job. I have my 9 to 5 job right over here, and then when that's done, I turn to this job, which is my out of the park job. So like but it's I take it so seriously, and it's not that I don't like people objectifying the content in a negative way. I just it's I want everybody to like it. And you know what? Like I've had plenty of conversations with people, and I've really tried and continue to try to not let that stuff bother me. I'm a very light side, dark side kind of guy. And the dark side is very easy to be seduced by. It's easy to be negative. It's easy to engage in negativity back and forth. It's not productive. It doesn't lead to anything good. It's much harder to stay on the light side of that. And in my case, remove myself and allow people their forum to talk about stuff. And I think, again, that's the unique position that we're in with this giant Discord where I'm there, Rich is there, like there's so many of us there. It's easy to get a hold of us. We're always, accessible. Like it's this unique environment that we've created. And I think for me, sometimes I just need to distance myself from that a little bit and let people talk about the things that they want to talk about, whether they liked it or whether they didn't like it. And, I've really been working to try to not take things as personally as sometimes it seems that I do. And I've definitely been guilty of that in the past. I make no effort to hide that, but I also make no efforts to apologize for it, because at the end of the day, I'm still human. Like I'm not a robot cranking out content. I'm still a human being. I still have feelings. It's just sometimes I need to recognize that certain spaces can be allocated for people to gripe about the things they need to gripe about. And then when that dust settles, that's when I can come in and say, hey, like, pick out a few of the things and respond to them and just and move on, instead of trying to shoot people down when they're not critiquing the content as a critique of me. They're just critiquing the content because they didn't like it. And a wonderful example. I mean, people are crapping all over the special edition Peak Babe Ruth. I get it. Historically, Babe Ruth, not a big perfect team guy. I totally understand it. It's one of those things where, from my perspective, as the person who's responsible for that, I'm continuously trying to not take it personally and to just realize that, everybody's coming from, well, not everybody, but 99.9% of the people are coming at it from the standpoint of they just want the game to be better. And they're invested in the Perfect Team universe. And I'm appreciative of that. And, we're all growing and developing together. And, it's one of those things.
Yeah, and I think with a content release like that, you have people that had wagered on both sides of it. So you had people that had invested very heavily into the playoff set content, throwing a bunch of perfect points at trying to be in position to redeem the toppers at their first opportunity. And so if someone sinks a couple million PP into something, they're really wagering that they're getting something that's going to transform their team. And if something pops up that they don't feel like it is that, you're going to be the immediate target of that venom. And I think it goes the other way too. For people that had punted on the collection, if you would have released 2 cards that did get the community frothing at its capability and at its ability to really transform the meta, then I think you would have had people saying, these missions are impossible. They're brand new cards. We had no way to prepare. And now you've given everyone with a huge wallet a huge step up. So I think, as with any content release, there's going to be a damned if you do, damned if you don't element to it. But there's always the opportunity to thread the needle, listen to feedback, and improve as you go. And I think you guys have a pretty good track record of doing that.
A lot of the things that we've implemented and changes that we've made, are, and not just content related, but Perfect Team related in general. I mean, pretty much anything that we've added, changed, removed was done because of community feedback. Like, whenever we're having, and I can tell you for sure, this past month, October, we've had, lengthy calls discussing the Perfect Team roadmap. And the amount of times on that call that I've said, well, based on community feedback, this is probably the best thing that we could do in this particular avenue. Because that's where we want to go. We want OOTP and Perfect Team to be a community-driven experience. And when everything's hunky-dory and everything's perfect and nobody's giving feedback, well then, I'm just going to retire. Because what's like, and I've said that to Rich a few times. I said, my thing is, I love making content. I love making, these kind of decisions and crafting these kind of programs. And someday is going to come along where it's not challenging anymore. And I know that day is years and years away. And I hope it's extremely amounts of years away. Because to me, it's a challenge. It's trying to find stuff that everybody likes, but always having that open mind of saying, hey, we didn't like this particular thing. This segment of the community did not like this particular content for reason XYZ. And then looking at reason Z and saying, hey, that's something that we can take and put it at the top of the board for Perfect Team 22. I think, we're still 4.5 months away from the start of Perfect Team 22 content, but I think people will see immediately that we're definitely listening to what people want their content program to look like.
So I'm going to give you a time machine right now, and I'm going to give you one mulligan. What is one thing that happened? And it can be a collection and how that was done. It can be a content release. It can be an individual card. But you get a time machine and one mulligan. What is it that you do differently in PT21 than how it happened?
Not having toppers for the team of the decade. That was an absolute boneheaded move on my part. It wasn't something I considered. I didn't realize that team of the decade not having toppers would be such a hot button issue that it was. Looking back on it and the way people collected them, and then not having any overarching reward to redeem it for, that's one I wish I could probably have back. Again, I don't think about those kind of things often. Obviously, the double Eddie Plank thing I mentioned already, that's more of a minor thing that would have been a pretty easy fix. But yeah, that I think that team of the decade would have been served pretty well by having a final guy that you could work towards. That would probably be the one where I would probably go back and say we probably should have did that one differently.
If there's one thing that the community likely doesn't know or likely doesn't often think about that increases the difficulty of planning and executing content and planning and executing a power creep game cycle here, what's one thing that you'd like us to know?
I think it's so. I think the biggest thing that I wish I could instill on people is just the volume of what we look at to build a content program. When we started planning for Perfect Team 21, we had an initial batch of 24,791 potential cards. It's an astronomical amount of cards. um, and we narrowed it down to a short list of about 7,700, and then took that 7,700 and narrowed it down to the roughly 50, about 5,000 we're going to end up with, probably a little more than that. I don't have the exact number, but I know we're at 48 and change right now, 12 weeks to go. So we're going to break the 5,000 threshold by the time it's all said and done. And the taking that large of a amount of potential, spreading it out over 45 weeks, tournaments, missions, content, rewards, initial launch cards, trying to make sure that eras are represented, that players are represented, that teams are represented. Just the scale of what we're trying to do, and literally having like 3 people that are doing it. Again, there's like OTP, the whole team is less than 15 people.
Right.
And, like, I know most people appreciate, like, the scale of what we're trying to do. Like, for me, I could literally, if I was of that frame of mind, I could second guess every content set we've ever done and give you a TLDR one liner of something I wish we did different, and
Mm-hmm.
I wish we had this guy in this set and this guy in that set, and I wish we did this guy here and that guy here, and this guy was originally supposed to be the reward for that, but we decided to go with this, and this guy should have been there. We could do a 4-hour post-mortem on PT21 content, and I could, but at the end of the day, that doesn't service the community, that doesn't service me, that doesn't service ultimately the game. So just the scale of what we're trying to do, I think sometimes people look at it in terms of a 1 week bubble and say, hey, this is this 1 week, but it's part of such a larger pie. And on our side of that, I think this being the first year where we've had to plan all of this right from the beginning, with the missions and the tournaments and the content and the larger mission programs, and doing things like the Elite Spotlight series that we did early on, which was a COVID related edition, was not something we originally planned on doing. Um, we've learned a lot from that. Again, Perfect Team 22 planning is light years ahead of where we were this time last year. I'm so much more comfortable with the planning aspect of it and what we want to do. I'm trying not to get giddy because I know things that we're working on, and I'm super excited to start like talking about those things in 4 months or so. But yeah, for us, I just want people to know that that we're trying to get better every day, and we just hope that as the days and weeks and months and years go on, that we can continue to prove that we have a vision where we want Perfect Team to go and where we want the content to go, and we're going to make it work, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, you mentioned how difficult it is to plan all of this ahead of time, and then something comes along that no one could plan for, that being COVID. How do you think that COVID uniquely affected this game cycle?
I think obviously the first and foremost thing was that just the amount of time that people were able to spend playing the game versus in a normal year, and the influx of new users, which initially created a lot of server problems for us. And the first month of the game was not a fun experience for anybody. um you know Again, it's, and a lot of people can speak to the contrary, but I mean, we did not anticipate the inflow of users and the time that was going to be spent, how quickly people were going to complete the live missions, um, and then all of a sudden be left with very little to do because, the initial, centerpiece we had was the live missions, and grinding for Yogi, and we kind of expected that to take longer than it did. Um, and I think a combination of how relatively easy they were, versus such a flow of cards moving around because of all the additional users and all the additional time spent, all the additional packs being opened. It was, there was cards flying all over the place. We've seen 7 times as many auction house transactions this year as we saw last year. And that's old data now. It could be quite more than that now, but there was a period of time where we were tracking, 7 times more auction activity. Um, so I think, for us, it was that initial shock of, well, crap, we can't, we have to find things to fill the holes. So we need to develop some more content, give more people more stuff to do, more things to chase, keep them engaged. Otherwise, we're going to start losing people really early. And obviously that has continued. I mean, we're still, and a lot of people are still working from home, and in states and countries and provinces and areas that are, still on lockdown or on partially on lockdown, and we still see, huge increases in the amount of playtime on the game. But yeah, those initial 6 weeks were very, very, not scrambly, but it really opened our eyes to, how we had to kind of make a few decisions on our feet to keep people engaged and keep the content going.
I've got a nuts and bolts question for you. How and why was 2010 chosen as the league baseline, and do you ever see that changing?
So my understanding of why they chose 2010 is one of the most historically balanced seasons in history. And I don't know where they pull that information from, but when they look at the overall, peaks and valleys of the different stat categories and not park factors, but the stat factors, 2010 is nicely kind of balanced. It's got a good balance. It's kind of before the high K power era, and it's kind of at a good pitching era. So the reason why 2010 was chosen by the dev team is that they felt it would lead to a balanced environment, that they would be able to build around. Do I envision the 2010 baseline changing? I do not. I don't have any information to support that one way or another. I just don't think it's something that the team is considering. Um, Maybe at some point someday. Obviously, we use the different stat factor eras in tournaments. We have them all the way back to dead ball era tournaments. But in terms of the main league simulation, I don't anticipate 2010 to be changing anytime soon.
So as we iterate into out of the park 2021 or 2022, learning all the things we learned from 21, this is your opportunity to drop a little nugget, drop a little hint, share what you can, and get people jazzed and excited about why 22 is going to be awesome.
I just think in terms of, and I mean, obviously there is extremely limited, the kind of things that I could talk about. Um, because I'd like to have a job after the show airs. But I think, you know what, and this is going to be the not sexy answer, and I apologize, but I mean it when I say it. I wish that people could experience the feelings that I've experienced when going through these perfect team roadmap calls, and afterwards, and chatting with Rich, because we chat as a large group. There's myself and Rich, and we have the server guys, and obviously Marcus is there, and we have the roster guys, and we're kind of discussing different ideas and different things we want to do, and UI and UX and content and stuff, and modes that we want to add. And I wish I could bottle and share the feeling that Rich and I both had after we completed the perfect team roadmap calls. And I wish it was contagious. Like, it's just the level of commitment that our team has, and the direction that we're currently on and what we want to accomplish for 22 and beyond is just stuff that is going to blow people away from the little stuff to the big stuff. It's just it's I'm so excited to be able to talk about some of these things and watch them grow and watch them develop. I mean, I've been here since pre-perfect team days. And we talked about it earlier. I would have never imagined in 2 years, perfect team barely 2 years old, that we would be having this conversation. That I would be being interviewed by an amazing content creator who's doing some really great stuff, talking about this mode in this game that thousands and thousands of people play every single day. And to be able to take that and look at where we are now, and then knowing where we're going to be in 5 months, 12 months, 2 years. And it brings a smile to my face because I'm like, man, we're just getting started. And it's just, I'm so excited to be able to talk about some of these things. Obviously, most people know that I can't, but it's not just from a content perspective. We have so many great ideas on how we want to keep the perfect team universe growing and evolving and be more engaging. And stay tuned, man. Stay tuned.
I think we all will stay tuned, that's for sure. So let's shift the focus a bit. Let's take it off the content and on to Kris Jardine. So we've talked at length throughout the interview so far about the many hats that you wear there, about the challenges of designing the content sets, cascading the flow of talent for a functioning game power cycle, and then dealing with all of us on the Discord. Does that all-encompassing nature of your role ever weigh on you?
Constantly. I feel an enormous amount of pressure, to be honest, because I am the one person responsible for translating community feedback into meaningful change. I have been that person for 2 years, and that role has expanded and has grown as the amount of people have expanded and have grown. I feel an enormous amount of pressure to be that, as you called me incorrectly, the face of the franchise earlier. But I do consider myself to be the face of Perfect Team in multiple facets. I'm when it comes to Perfect Team stuff, I'm usually the first point of contact for a lot of users. I routinely get 50 to 100 DMs a week just from Discord. Anything from support issues to improvement requests to, hey, do you know where I can find this? Hey, there's this issue with this card. And I don't take that role lightly. It does, weigh on me. I really do need to learn to disconnect a little bit better and prioritize a little bit better so that I'm not. I think work from home, it's been very difficult for me to disconnect from OOTP a little bit because I'm always right here. I spend this room. I spend 14 hours a day in this room. Between that computer and this computer, I'm constantly connected to something. So for me, it's that constant pressure of, oh man, Kidneys has found this error in this thing because he tends to do that from time to time. And I want to get that fixed right away. So then I run to the Slack and it's like, hey, can we do this? And it's like, okay, now I got to go back to Kidneys and say, yeah, we're gonna fix this. And he's like, when? And I'm like, well, okay, I got to go back here now. And it's it's a lot of pressure, and I don't take that role lightly. I take it very seriously. I know there's a lot of people in the community who respect me as a person and in the job that I do. And the very least I could do is to return that respect. And when people have issues and have feedback and have criticisms and have things that need to be distributed to the rest of the team, that I do that to the best of my ability. Yes, it does lead to some pressure situations, but hey, that's gaming sometimes.
Has the weight of this ever driven you to the point where you felt burnt out?
A couple of times, yeah. I think I think there has been 2 times specifically where I had to completely get away and take a weekend and just do my own thing, be available for DMs only, and just kind of not monitor regular conversations. That's that's occurred twice that I can remember distinctly. Um, but yeah, like and again that comes down to a lot of what we talked about the criticism part is again that's on me to be a better manager of time and a better priority organizer and dealing with the things that I need to deal with and recognizing when I can let something simmer for a few minutes and just kind of as this job evolves kind of evolve with it to make sure that I'm not contributing negatively to my state of mind and my well-being. um, but yeah, there has been with any job. I think people get to the point where they get burnt out. One of them was the end of the face of the franchise. Once the face of the franchise final reveal came out, I completely, you know, took a few days off and went golfing a few times and just focused on some other stuff. Not because I was disappointed with how the program ended. It was just such a draining, you know, train of content, and that show, which it was just that we were at a 15 the whole time, the whole show. And I remember when that show ended, and we got the content live. I remember, that was about 10 after 11 my time. And I just sat here in the chair for like 15 minutes with everything closed. I wasn't looking at anything and was just focusing on my breathing for a little bit. Um, yeah, it can lead to moments where you're not at your best, but you just get, it's like any other job. You gotta focus on the things that you need to be focused on and realize that you need to be able to prioritize and to be able to just do your job effectively.
As with anybody in any job, there are things about it you love, things about it you hate, and everywhere in between. So, as it relates to the many responsibilities you have with Out of the Park, what aspects of your role do you enjoy the most, and what aspects do you enjoy the least?
Hmm. There's so many things that I enjoy, but for me, the thing that I enjoy the most is that I'm the guy that gets to tell the history of baseball every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Like it's just you have, I mean, because you're a creator as well. But when I'm sitting here at 8:40, I'm locked in, I'm ready to go. I got my hat on. I know what's coming. I know what the next hour of my life is going to look like. I get to hit that button and I get to ratchet it up to 11 for 45 minutes and tell the history of baseball with whatever the theme is that week in a way that only I get to do in the way that I can. That to me, there is no more enjoyable feeling than that. It's absolutely ludicrous to me that a guy from Atlanta, Canada gets to reach out to hundreds of people every Thursday night with, you know, digital baseball cards. And like it's an unfathomable thing, and I love doing it so much. I mean, there's so many great things about it, like interacting with the community and meeting people that that are just so engaged and so awesome. Um, but the this week in Perfect Team part of it is probably the part I enjoy the most. I think the part I enjoy the least is dealing with people who that 0.1% who have no interest in being productive members of the community and exist only to tear down what we're trying to do. And I hate defaulting to that, because I feel like that's a cop out. Like, oh, any community manager has to deal with trolls and negativity. But there's so many good things about what we're doing and the Perfect Team universe and our community on Discord and the forums and Facebook and Twitter, um, that the hard part for me is when you have to deal with that one person that they're just they don't know where the line is. And it's unfortunate that that over time we've had to remove people from our communities because they unfortunately don't know where the line is. It's sad. It really is sad because I don't harbor any negative personal feelings for people. I don't know the majority of people personally in the community. I mean, I feel like I've grown personal relationships with a lot of them. But when it comes to the point where we have to have that hard conversation between myself and the moderators about, hey, I really think we need to look at removing this person for reasons XYZ, that's not an enjoyable experience for me because I don't ever want to do that. I want everyone to be able to exist in our sphere. But, it's just, again, sometimes some people just don't know where the line is. And it's unfortunate that that's had to happen. And it's unfortunate that when it does happen, because our Discord is such a large interactive space, it's very public. Um, I've taken some bad heat for decisions that we've made in the past, and I'm sure I will continue to take bad heat from decisions that we'll make in the future. I mean, I was in the chat a couple weeks ago when you asked Walnut about what had happened in his situation, and it's he explained it pretty good. I mean, it was one of those things. Nothing that's ever done can be undone, but that part of the community, the moderation side of the community, that is not an enjoyable experience for me because I just want everybody to get along and be constructive and be positive members of the Perfect Team universe. And it's just unfortunate that sometimes, that's not possible.
How do you define success in your role? What happens that makes you know deep down that you've done a great job on a given cycle for a year, on a given content set, on a given card, on a given rating? How do you define success for yourself?
So it's funny for me when I saw this question, I thought, well, I'm just going to say, hey, when the check comes in, baby, that's how I know it's successful. But you know what? Here's the thing. For me, success is twofold because ultimately, success for me is when the community is happy. I'll tell you, there is no better feeling on a Thursday, 5 minutes after the show is done and the content is live and the Discord is quiet because everybody's in the game trying to get the cards, trying to complete the missions. That to me is the ultimate feeling because if people are unhappy, they're in the Discord talking about how they're unhappy. They're not in the game trying to work on the content. So for me, ultimately, I want people to enjoy what we're doing. I understand that not 100% of people are going to love it. And again, like we talked about earlier, I think if 100% of people enjoy it, then what do we have to strive for? But I get messages all the time from people who really support me and support what we're doing. I save a lot of those. People don't know that about me. Anyone who's ever sent me a positive, supportive message, I have it saved in a file on my Google Drive. I copy and paste them into the file. And sometimes when I'm having a hard day, I will consult that file and will read some of the things that people have said that lift me up and make me feel like I am doing a good job. On the other side of that, obviously, I want Marcus to be happy with the job that I'm doing. He's a extremely supportive, uh, guy. I call him the CEO. I don't technically think he is that anymore, but Marcus has always been extremely supportive of what I've tried to do. He has basically given me the keys to Perfect Team and said, don't put it into a tree. And so for me, Marcus he's not a man of a whole lot of words, but it's those when him and I'll have a conversation, he'll say, "Man, I'm so proud of the work you're doing," and like it's great. Um, yeah, like to me, if the boss is happy and the community's happy, I can't ask for much more than that.
I'm glad you brought up Marcus because it's a perfect segue onto some questions that we have that are more future focused. So, Com2 US, the new boss, about a month ago, they buy Out of the Park, new 100% owner. Were you surprised?
No. I mean, I'm not privy to. I mean, as a part-time employee, I'm not privy to business-related conversations that occur. I would say I'm surprised of this from the standpoint of how it happened and when it did. I wouldn't say I was surprised because again, it's business. Things happen in business all the time. I think again, anybody can look at what we're doing with Out of the Park baseball and see that it would be a desirable thing to add to their portfolio. I think we've got a great team of people that are all dedicated to making an amazing game. And I mean, what company would not want to add that to their to their portfolio of offerings? So from that standpoint, I'm not surprised. I mean, I think anytime something like that happens and you're not inside the inner circle, it's obviously surprising. I think I distinctly remember the conversation where I learned about it, and it was, hey, this happened. This is what it means. I think I'm sure you're going to ask me in the next question, but a lot of people have misinterpreted what it does mean. But yeah, on the surprising part, on one hand I was, and on one hand I wasn't really.
And so, how do you envision, or what have you been told would be even better, but how do you envision your role changing or evolving based on what you know today?
I mean, in the short to medium term, it hasn't changed or evolved at all. We're doing things exactly the same. I have not been asked to do anything more or less. I think that, as Marcus has explained in the Q&A post on the forums, they have no intention in changing the way that we do business currently. Again, we're still the same team that we were a month ago, 2 months ago. I think what this is going to allow us to do, and again, these are things that happen way above my pay grade, but I think it will give us access to different resources and different opinions, that we can rely on. But ultimately, the development of Out of the Park baseball is going to be left in the people who have developed Out of the Park baseball. My job has not changed. I have not been asked to do anything differently. I have not been asked to curb how I conduct business and how I develop content and how we're future planning. So for me, it's been business as usual since the day I found out. It's been absolutely no change.
So, let's look a little bit further out onto the horizon. Out of the Park is a company with a DNA. There are things that Out of the Park is really great at, and there are things that, due to resource constraints or other reasons, have not been able to execute on timelines that were desired. So, the same can be said for Com2 US. They bring a lot to the table from a technical might, from a mobile games strategy. So this is really the merging of two different companies with two different skill sets. And so if this acquisition went perfectly, and these two companies go through this acquisition and achieve that synergy, the buzzword synergy that everyone looks for when you acquire a company, in your mind, what would that look like? Whether it's from a content perspective, from a gacha game development perspective, mobile, etc. I'm sure that the wheels in your head started spinning when this happened, because maybe something that either was off the table or was not practical in any reasonable time frame could potentially have that door cracked.
I'll start with the last part first. I don't really think it changed anything in terms of what my thinking was. Um, because again, I'm a very, I mentioned earlier, like I don't really dwell in the past, but I also don't deal in hypothetical situations either. I look at what we have, and when scenarios present themselves, I deal with them at that time. So, when we had the conversation about, hey, this is happening, you know, and when that conversation was over, I really didn't look at it in terms of, hey, this opens this door or closes that door or whatever. For me, it's again, it's I look at what we have brought to the table, what we look to bring to the table, what I consider, a synergetic movement forward is we just keep developing the best darn baseball management game in existence. We continue to improve on the main game. We continue to improve on the 3D. We continue to improve on Perfect Team. We continue to, improve the online performance. We continue to just keep getting better. I think that's what we all are here for. We want to continue to make the game better. And I think a lot of the reason why, you know, we were excited when this happened was because I'm sure they want the same thing. We all want the same thing, right? We just want to make an amazing baseball game. And I don't know if what doors are going to be open and what doors are going to be closed and what things we're going to be able to do and what things we're going to really be able to do and what things we're going to not be able to do. But again, in the several weeks since this has happened, again, it hasn't changed our mandate. It hasn't changed our focus. We are completely 100% wide open, committed to Out of the Park Baseball 22, to Perfect Team 22. That hasn't changed. That will not change. What that's going to look like 4 or 5 years from now, it would be foolish of me to speculate on that, to be honest, because I have all these wonderful, great, big ideas that I would love to see. Obviously, people point to being able to do KBO stuff in Perfect Team. Maybe, maybe not. It's one of those things that, again, if the scenario presents itself and it's something that we have access to, I think it would be super cool. But in the short term, we're focused on the things that we have been focused on for the last 8 months, and that is just making the game better every single day, making better content, making better decisions that are going to have a great impact on our community, and that's not going to change. And my thing is that, to me, and this is going to probably how do I say this so that people don't start yelling in the chat? there is a ceiling to this for me. Like, I have goals that I would like to accomplish doing this job, but ultimately I think there's a ceiling to what I can do personally as the director of live content services. I don't know where that ceiling is, and I don't know when we're going to hit it. Like I said earlier, I think it's going to be years away, but I would expect that as we move forward and we have this new relationship, that everything is going to maintain the way it was, and we're going to continue to work towards making an awesome game, and whatever tomorrow brings is what tomorrow brings.
So let's shift from Out of the Park's future and talk more about Snaggle J's future, which you just touched on a second ago. But speaking specifically to your personal Twitch channel, so in looking at your channel, I see a long list of games from wrestling. You did a ton of wrestling, to hockey, to Flight Simulator, to other baseball games, and on as we go back the years. Do you see yourself continuing to stream games into the future on your channel?
I think it's always going to be something that I do as a pastime. I think I gave up the illusions of being a full-time content creator on a personal level years ago. I enjoy doing it, much like I enjoy it. It's like doing This Week in Perfect Team, but different. I have people in my community that I love and that I respect the absolute heck out of, and that I love interacting with on a regular basis. And to be honest, I wish I could had more time to interact with them, and I just don't. But streaming on my personal channel is something that I've always enjoyed. It's something that I'm always going to try to do occasionally when I'm able to. It's hard, man. you know, 2 jobs, 2 kids, and a nasty golf habit eats up a lot of my time. I coach baseball in the summer. I coach soccer in the fall. I'm, active on a couple of boards here. Um, it's really really hard, and obviously, like, being able to sit down and commit to playing a game for 3 hours and then making the conscious decision to stream it and talk about it and interact. That's a difficult decision. A lot of times the evening comes around and I just want to sit back and, you know lay back in my lazy boy with my Nintendo Switch and check out my Animal Crossing island, and just relax and just be in my own little world for an hour. But like I said, streaming's always going to be the kind of thing that I'm going to want to do with really no goal, no end game in mind, just something that I enjoy doing as an occasional interactive outlet.
Coming back to Perfect Team, I know there was some momentum weeks back for the formation of a players' council. Whatever came of that?
We still plan on doing the players' council. I know it was kind of a hot button thing, and we had said that we plan on doing a players' council. And there's some things that have happened in the intermediate that have kind of taken our focus away. But Rich and I were actually talking about the players' council the other day and trying to put some stuff together. I think our biggest thing with the players' council is we want to make sure that we set the expectations of what we're looking for and what we're expecting people to commit to from the get-go. And that's a difficult thing for us to get to. But what we want to avoid is having a bunch of people submit applications and then us picking 8 people, for example, and then saying to those 8 people, well, here's what we expect, and then 7 of them are like, nope. Because again, there's a lot of different factors at play here. I mean, there's the potential that people may have to sign NDAs if it's something that we're going to talk about, privileged information. Not that we've made that determination, but that's something that's on the table. There's a lot of different things that we need to check. I love the idea of a players' council. I know there's a lot of people who, in the DLL community especially, who are very active vocal members who all feel that they would be great members of such a council. Um, I think that it's something that is eventually going to come to pass. I just think for us, and by us I mean Rich and I specifically, we really want to make sure that we know what we want the players' council to be before we put the wheels in motion and then have to reverse and say, well, okay, and then start over and then go forward again, because that's a waste of time for us. It's a waste of time for the community. It just doesn't come. There's nothing good comes out of that.
Yeah, I think being very intentional about the formation of and ensuring that you have a good representation of the various player types in the game. I think taking your time and making sure that you have a well-functioning players' council that serves the needs of the community is way more important than rushing that together. So kudos for the patience you guys are showing there. I'm glad you referenced DLL, because the next question directly relates to them. How much less do you think of Robbie Alomar, knowing that he declined the DLL request to do a cameo for you?
I mean, here's the thing. To be fair, if I was Robbie Alomar, I probably would have turned you guys down too. No, listen. Here's the thing. It's funny because when that was mentioned to me, I mean, I thought it was a joke at first, and then it made very clear to me that it was not a joke. And I mean, here's the thing. I can't lie. I mean, Robbie Alomar is not really my favorite Blue Jay anyway. I like the guy. Great moments. I actually got to listen to him and his father and his brother speak at the All-Star game in Cleveland at a little Q&A session. There was probably only 30 of us in the room.
That's cool.
It was super cool. It's just one of the many, many, many things that this game and this community has allowed me to experience. And but I don't think any less of him for that. I mean, I'm sure he had his reasons, and I mean, it would have been super cool. Don't get me wrong. It would have been out of this world, but it's one of those things. Life finds a way.
So if you could play a game of catch and really shoot the breeze with any player from any era, living or dead, who would it be?
Man, that's tough.
Stumped him.
It's just there's so many people that come to mind. I think of the people that I relate to, like on a like do I go fandom? Do I go people that I tried to model my playing career around? Do I go like old school and just say what everybody else probably says and says like Babe Ruth? I think for me, it would be a difficult time to decide between Big Hurt. Big Hurt would be on the short list for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And Roy Halladay. And obviously Roy Halladay no longer with us, so obviously I would have to default to Big Hurt. But those to me would be the two that kind of stick out a little bit more. There's like a next tier. I think Carlton Fisk comes to mind, Pudge, Roger Clemens, Pujols, Eckersley, Satchel Paige, obviously Jackie, and again the obvious choices like Babe and Lou Gehrig. But to me, Frank and Roy would kind of be at the top of the list.
So you've almost made it through the gauntlet. You've got one question to go through, and it comes from one of our viewers. It comes from Not Walnut. And unfortunately, you're not allowed to leave the interview without an answer. And the question is, which content set will you be releasing 102 Vlad in?
So here's the thing. Obviously, there is no such thing as a 102 Vlad because that would break. I could go into the ins and outs of how the overall scale actually works, but since that was not the question, I will not do that. You know what? I would say, listen, there's 12 weeks to go. We've got all kinds of fun stuff coming up. Obviously, it's not going to be this week because Team of the Year is this week. I don't think Vlad played in 2020. I have to consult my records, but I think that's correct. So it won't be this week. He wasn't much of a mustache guy, so it won't be next week. Hardware Heroes the week after that could be a possibility. I would say, listen, there's a long way to go. There is still the possibility out there for a off the charts Vlad. So I would say stay tuned.
You heard it here first, folks. So that's going to conclude our interview. Kris, thank you so much for your time. Almost got Joe Rogan-esque here with how much time I've kept you. So I really appreciate how willing you were to not only share your time, but share your insights. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I think, you know what, here's the thing. I told you before, I mean, to me, an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, you know what, it's not every day that I get the chance to open up and talk about the game in this kind of sense. And, like I said, I've watched your show. I appreciate, what you're doing and the kind of content you're putting out. With and looking at the TWIPT, which is a great show that I recommend everybody watch on Thursday nights, with you and Kidneys doing the breakdowns, regardless of how much you hate my content from week to week. It's still a great resource for the Perfect Team users. So, but for me, like it's funny because like we have such a unique game and such a unique universe and such a unique community that like how many other game companies have their content guy going onto a stream and talking about everything from his personal life to how he reacts to content to what they're looking at in the future and stuff like this. To me, I rarely pass up on these opportunities because I think it's a great way to talk to the community and to help grow the game, and that's ultimately what my role is here. I hope that you your expectations were met by me coming on the show. I hope that your community enjoyed the interview, and you know what? Maybe we'll do it again after Perfect Team 22 comes out.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you so much, Kris. And I look forward to that future one.
You got it.
So that is the interview, guys. What'd you think? Did you love it? Did Kris pull back the curtain for you a bit there? I think he did. I think he definitely did. So thank you, Snaggle J, Kris Jardine. That was awesome. 90 minutes of rapid fire questions, being willing to take them all on straight away. Really appreciate it. Tons of appreciation for all the love in the channel too. So many gifted subscriptions, so many bits flying around. You guys are awesome. You guys are awesome, and you fuel me to keep at this thing and to keep trying to come up with new ways of analyzing this game. Whether we're educating on Thursday, whether we're entertaining on a Sunday with the Perfect League World Series, or whether we're trying to give some intrigue to you on a Tuesday and showing you someone within the community. So thank you guys so much. Now, if you were new to the channel today, please do follow. Please click that notification so you see when we go live. And we got a new sub there with Hitman. Thanks so much, man. And if you want to support the channel, please subscribe. We've got some brand new emotes. They've been flying around the chat. They're new as of today. So check those out, and that's a good time. All right, so next broadcast is going to be on Thursday, when Kidneys and I do This Weekend Perfect Team. I don't really know what to expect. You know, the last This Weekend Perfect Team, the last three of them, were all the culmination of the playoff set. So we're getting something brand new on Thursday. Excited to see what that looks like. And then next week on this show, we're going to have Simple Hunter, Out of the Park's Pac-Man. And our interview with him is going to coincide with his opening of his 250,000th pack. So if we time it right, he'll be able to rip that 250,000th pack right after the stream. But what we're going to dive into there is really what drives him to rip in the volumes that he does. What are his favorite pulls? What's a good session? What's a bad session? Nobody's ripped more packs than him, so it'll be good to hear it from the horse's mouth. But thanks again, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you Thursday.